Hey everybody, this is Perch. Role replacement is a big topic in comics. It's a big topic because, in many ways, the idea of legacy heroes, people passing on a mantle, this is not a new storyline idea. This has been going on for quite a long time. And it kind of like the all new number one issue and the double sized, kind of the death of a character, these gimmicks that get injected. A big one is somebody else has to pick up the mantle. And a lot of people are losing their minds over Jane Foster Thor. But if you look back, Marvel has teased this for a long time. There's a what if issue there. And one of the big storylines, one of the big mysteries or aspects to Thor was always like nobody could pick up the hammer except somebody who was worthy. But they would tease all the time, like, be like, oh, but what if Captain America tried? He seems pretty worthy. I don't know. And they've been teasing this for a long time, this idea. And the reason why they tease it is because it's a fun plot device of saying, hey, this hero that you knew, there might be a different version of this hero. Right? Well, like, what if it was a different Captain America? So none of this is particularly new. It's getting a lot of attention now, primarily because the comic publishers or the writers will go out and they'll say things like, hey, it's we've got too many white heroes. It's like I've started to wonder a little bit if nobody gave those interviews, if nobody said those sentences, but they did the same things. They went ahead and replaced, Riri, and they replaced, Captain America, and just they did all of these things. Bring in John Kent, have him call him Superman, make him bisexual. If they did that, but they didn't give the interviews. They didn't go out there and say, or they gave the interviews just saying, hey, like, we're proud to give this a shot. It'll be something new, and we're excited to see what readers think, and just leave it there. But instead, in many cases, they take an extra step and they want to kind of bash the classic villain, the white male, in the process. And if they just didn't say that, I do wonder a little bit if there'd be the same kind of reaction and backlash and everything else that happens. To me, I wonder how much of it is because of those kinds of statements and less because of the actual changes to the characters. Because I mentioned, the characters have been swapped out and shifted around tons. What's somewhat new is this very outspoken, we're tired of seeing white men who are straight. Like, that's kind of the new part. And I don't know. I think that's what people are objecting to, honestly, more than any of the replacements. But be that as it may. Here's a viewer question that goes into it a little bit more. It says, hey, Perch, I hope all is well with you and the family. I'm writing to ask you it just ends there, but I think you mean question. So the mail says, I know you talked a lot about race gender swaps like Jane Foster's Thor, Sam's Captain America, but how do you feel about role replacements? What I mean is roles such as love interest, key figures in a superhero city, mayor, police chief, reporter, etc., to supporting heroes, villains with uniqueness and purpose. For example, you can point to the easiest role change, the love interest, like when Gwen Stacy was killed off because she wasn't interesting to readers as Mary Jane was. But for me, the biggest example is the Joker's daughter and Harley Quinn. Duella Dent wasn't a one-and-done villainess. She had been in and out of comics since she was introduced in Batman Family Number 6, August 1976. But when the animated series came around, instead of giving her the Mr. Freeze treatment, they instead created a character that served a similar purpose in Harley Quinn, a female Joker. I blame her shift in alignment to the comics. Because of this, the character of Duella Dent became less flexible with what writers could do with her. I do apologize for a long mail. Not that long. And I hope I'm not inconvenienced you. Good Lord, no, of course not. That's what the questions are for. It brings up a good point. So this is where you don't necessarily have you don't have a new Harley Quinn. Like somebody comes in and says, finally, Harley Quinn, the character Harley, is dead. And we've introduced a, disabled Latinx character to be the new Harley Quinn. And they were going to call that character Harley Quinn and everything else. But more like Punchline almost, where it's like, hey, we're going to introduce a new character with a new identity and new everything, but they're going to serve a similar role, like Duella Dent versus Harley Quinn. Mary Jane, Gwen Stacy. I don't know, was Gwen Stacy unpopular? I mean, Mary Jane was more popular, but I don't know that. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at it, but I don't think that there was this sense that like Gwen Stacy was super boring and people hated her and they really wanted her out of there. I don't think that was true. or I don't think that was the case, but I may have it wrong. But I seem to remember Gwen Stacy was reasonably popular. Mary Jane, was always Mary Jane, and I think people really, like to kind of fantasize about Peter and Mary Jane getting together. But anyway, I be that as it may. Somebody can correct me in the comments. Somebody who remembers that history a little bit better than I do certainly probably has some input into it. Anyway, I think that role replacements, as you're talking about it, often make sense and are good. I think that it's worth doing. I mean, it depends on the story. If you have a story that can connect it all together and that can bring some of this stuff out there and put it all together, then no problem. To me, it's all as a service of the story. If the plot works, if the progression of the character is right, if all those elements fall into place, then in life, I mean, in real life, we have different girlfriends, we get married, we get divorced, different people come in and out of our lives, and we have friends that change, and we have business relationship, the boss change, and things change all the time. And I think there's no reasons why comics can't have the same thing going on. And in many ways, I think it's good and additive. We've seen a lot of things evolve of different Daily Planet staff members when it was a TV station, just kind of all these different status quo changes. And I think it provides a nice tapestry to overall the comic and the character and everything else that happens there. I think it's healthy and it's good. To me, that's probably the biggest reason why I see identity replacements as, I don't know, not necessarily subtractive, but it's not growing anything. It's taking something that in theory should be new, but it's cramming it into as much old as possible. And so your universe doesn't really grow. It just stays kind of the same. Now, granted, some of these characters, they come in, they do the role replacement thing for a little while, and then they're like, okay, and now we're giving the role back to the original character, and we're giving a new identity to the new character. And that's kind of like War Machine was for James Rhodes. But I don't, I think that fails more often than it works, because you're having to do the trick twice. Basically, you're having to sell the audience on, hey, here's a character, and you're going to like him or her as much or more than the original. But also, after it spins back out, hey, you're now going to have to like this new character that had the old role in a new role, and you're going to have to like, it's like you have to do the work a second time. And to me, I always feel it'd be better to organically just kind of grow the group. Go ahead and have role replacements in the sense of, hey, there's a new mayor in town, there's a new police chief, there's a new girlfriend, there's a new best friend, whatever it happens to be. Peter Parker gets a new roommate. Hey, he's doing this. I think that for all the ways people criticize Marvel and other things they do right now, I feel like Nick Spencer did do a solid job of trying to introduce new elements to the supporting cast and give them complexity and give them a bunch of things going on and interesting ways it could all go. I feel like he did a pretty decent job of all that. I feel like it's largely getting erased now, but I think you should always be looking to how to grow the supporting cast or grow the character's environment rather than how to subtract from it. And so, I'm generally in favor of, when Stacy, people want to move on and do something new, so they're going to replace that role. I think that the Harley Quinn example is an interesting one because there is, the Duella Dent did get limited and that did shrink that character. So that, but again, a healthy, good, competent writer, I think, could come in and do a lot with Duella and just different aspects of that character. I think there's plenty of moments where you could do pretty exciting things with it. It doesn't have to be subtractive. So, I think introducing new characters, growing the universe is always healthy. And I think there's a lot of examples of that throughout comics. And I wish there was more effort spent toward that. Overall, I think comics does it always feels like, here's what always comes down to me, is you have this cosmic world. You have this, the infinite possibilities of the multiverse, people's powers, all these different things you can do. The world is only limited by your imagination. You can do anything. Which is why it's sad to me that so many writers are limited by their imagination. Why so often, there is they do less rather than more. When you have the possibility to do anything at all, to introduce any character, to grow the universe in any way, why it's like, well, let's make a young girl Iron Man and try and make that work. But like, it's just not. It seems disappointing to me because it always feels like you have all this ability to do anything you possibly want, and you picked the safest, most limited possible answer in all of that, and I don't get it. Anyway, good question. I'm curious what other roles people can identify here. What other things fit into this where you had a big status quo? Obviously, like I said, the Daily Planet for Superman was a big one. I think Spider-Man's had tons of this over time. I think Captain America's had different sidekicks, whether he's hanging out with Nomad or I guess he is Nomad or the Falcon, or he's with Diamondback, he's with D-Man. Like there's a lot of different shifts that have also happened through that world. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course. Thank you very much for the question. Never an inconvenience. And thanks for listening.